Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Christopher. So I'm just going to give people a few more seconds to come in. We've got a good crowd going. And after a few seconds, I'll go ahead and start. Okay, so welcome to our PHIUS webinar series. Today's webinar is Designing Successful Zero Energy Building Incentive Program. Our presenters will be Gabriela Martin and Lisa White. Kat wasn't able to present today. She's out sick, so Lisa will fill in for her. This is expected to be a 1-hour webinar. It'll be recorded and all registrants will have access to the recording afterwards via follow-up email. This webinar qualifies for 1 CPHC CEU. The CEUs are self-reported and the link and verification code will be provided at the end of the presentation. You'll also receive a follow-up email within a week with a certification, with a certificate and reporting information for your own records. So if you take a look at your control panel on the side of your screen, you'll see that there are a number of different options there. Feel free to type a question into the question box on the right. We may be able to answer a few questions if time allows at the end of the webinar. So I'll hand it over to Lisa and Gabriela.
Thank you, Chris. While you're on that sidebar, just mentioning this up front, there is another free webinar tomorrow comparing different net zero energy certifications. And I've put a link in there for registration for that webinar, just in case you're interested. Just don't want to forget to mention that. Okay, so Gabriela is going to start us off today. Gabriela Martin is the program director at the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation, where she oversees grants, including efforts to promote net zero energy buildings and net zero energy wastewater treatment plants. She has over 25 years of experience in policy, research, and analysis, energy modeling, program and product development in the fields of renewable energy, energy efficiency, and greenhouse gas emissions. She's a fellow of the American Solar Energy Society, has served on the ACES Board of Directors, and chaired the magazine advisory council for the Solar Today magazine. Gabriela received her MS in Environmental Management and Policy at the University of Pennsylvania, and a BA in Economics and French at the College of William & Mary. And from here, Gabriela, I'm going to go ahead and let you take over.
All right. Well, thank you, Lisa.
Yep.
Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining. So today I'll be speaking about the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation's Net Zero Energy Building Grant Program. That is eligibility, process, funding, and so on. And then we'll talk a little bit about the PHIUS feasibility studies, and then I'll again show you some projects that have received foundation support and are either already completed or are still underway. Oops, I'm trying to forward here. Great, okay. Good. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation, let me just provide a quick overview. We are a private foundation based in Chicago, Illinois. We were established in 1999 with an endowment of $225 million from Commonwealth Edison. And our mission is to advance energy efficiency, renewable energy, and preserve natural areas in Illinois. To date, we have made over about 5,400 grants exceeding $316 million. And you can get more information about all of our current grant programs on our website, which is illinoiscleanenergy.org. All right. So when we talk about net zero energy buildings, that is the kind the foundation is interested in supporting, we're really talking about buildings that are very, very energy efficient. We also talk about buildings that combine energy efficiency with sufficient renewable generation to offset their annual energy consumption. And so in some places, some parts of the world, pursuing net zero energy or even net plus buildings is pretty well established. But here in Illinois, we think there's kind of this misperception that these buildings are neither economical nor feasible. So this is something that we hope to change through our program. We also want to emphasize or encourage a shift to outcome-based building performance. And this is partly based on our experience. The foundation ran a high-performance green building program for about a decade. And it was easy to see that buildings didn't always perform as designed. We developed the Foundation's Net Zero Energy Building Grant Program in 2015 and we actually launched it and took our first applications in July of 2016. I mean, so far it's going pretty well, but it's a work in progress as we learn more and as we, get more experience. So I'm going to start just by highlighting some of the program requirements. So our Net Zero Energy Building Program, in order to be eligible for the grant program, the net zero project has to be located in Illinois. And that is just one of the restrictions that we have as a foundation. We can only make grants within our state here. Furthermore, the project has to be owned by a 501c3 charitable organization, a local government entity, college, university, or public school. So commercial and for-profit entities are not eligible to apply. And the project cannot have started construction by the time it comes in and seeks funding. Projects that are eligible and are interested in obtaining grants, they have to agree to maintain net zero energy building performance. And also we do require that the performance monitoring must be load specific and preferably real time. And furthermore, the data has to be publicly available. The project itself should also be accessible to the public on some level in some reasonable way. And then we as a foundation have also, in terms of the application process, put a lot of weight on the educational component or the educational impact of these projects. One of the things we're very interested in is having these net zero buildings be tools to educate the public as well as building professionals. So during the application, we're already asking for a well thought out education plan rather than having the education component be an afterthought, something that people address at the end, maybe after the building is completed. Our grant program makes funds available to new construction as well as renovation projects. So we're kind of agnostic, either is fine. But all projects have to obtain certification through PHIUS or the Living Building Challenge. We are currently also looking at LEED Net Zero, and this may become a certification option going forward. PHIUS and Living Building Challenge each have different levels of certifications. For our program, any one of these certifications is fine with us. We basically leave it up to our applicants to choose what certification level they would like to obtain. In other words, how aggressive they want to be. In fact, you could actually get certified through both organizations, but our grant dollars can only be used to help pay for one of them. And currently the funding for the program is up to $2 million per project. So what can this money be used for? The foundation wants these dollars to go towards minimizing the energy consumption of the project and maximizing the on-site renewable energy generation. But how that exactly plays out is unique to every project, which is why we don't really have specific list of items that we will support and we will not support, or formulas for calculating specific technology incentives. What we do is we pretty much work on a case-by-case basis with each project in the hope of maximizing the impact of our grant dollars. The grant funds, as I alluded before, can be used to help defray certification costs. And then we have a little earmark where 2.5% of the grant funds are earmarked for permanent educational display and signage. So if a project were to obtain a $2 million grant, that would mean that $50,000 would be set aside for that purpose. So how does our grant application actually work? The grant application process for this program starts with the submission of the RFI, which is our request for ideas form. We have a 2-page form on our program website that tries to collect high-level information about the project. Basically, we will take RFIs at any time throughout the year. However, if your project is following a certain timeline and you want to be considered for a specific grant cycle, then the RFI has to be submitted at least 9 weeks before the grant cycle deadline. But I highly recommend that anyone who's even thinking about an RFI contact us before they submit it. It's always good to get that discussion going and get information about the project. Once the foundation has received the RFI, once that's been submitted, we generally follow up within about 2 weeks, and then that begins the official discussion and kind of information and data collection about the project. We try to make a determination fairly early on whether this is a project that we might be interested or not. And if the foundation is interested in the project, we will issue an invitation to submit a pre-proposal application. And that can be done either in January or July. These are deadlines that we have because of our schedule internally of review committee meetings and board meetings that take place at certain times of the year. Now, if the pre-proposal is favorably reviewed, the next step is a submission of a full proposal, which is also by invitation. And there we determine the dates for full proposal submission in collaboration with the applicant, and that's oftentimes based on the timeline of the project. And then again, looking at the foundation's review committee and board meeting schedule, I have seen it take as little as 4 months from the pre-proposal submission to the grant award notification, especially if the project has an aggressive timeline or has a certain deadline that it has to meet. For example, like schools that know they have to have a building ready by the start of the academic year. But usually it takes a bit longer. I'd say closer to about 5 or 6 months to go through the whole process. This slide is very crammed, and I do apologize for that. But what we're trying to do here is really show, ideally, how the project development and the foundation's application process would align. What we're trying to show here is, ideally, what you should be doing during each one of those phases. So, for example, you can see that during the pre-design, what has to be done during the pre-design phase, schematic design, and design development. We really encourage folks to contact the foundation as early as possible if they're considering this grant program. Ideally, the RFI would already come in during the pre-design phase, which is also a good time to investigate additional resources. Here we have the Accelerate Performance Program, ComEd's new construction program, also solar incentives. If the project might rely on either a wind turbine or a ground-mounted solar installation, there's also the requirement to check in with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources and do an EcoCat study on their website. This is a study that actually tells you if you are either at or close to a site where there might be sensitive habitat or endangered species that you have to consider. And if that's the case, you have to work with IDNR to address this, and it takes a lot of time. So it's never too early to start. Also, during the pre-design phase, that's a good time to really understand the certification options, investigate PHIUS and Living Building Challenge, and determine which one you want to pursue. Again, projects can pursue both, but as I said before, the foundation only pays for one of the certifications. So if the foundation indeed is interested in the project and the applicant demonstrate that, project funding has been secured, there aren't any kind of other eligibility issues, when the project is then in the schematic design phase, you will be invited to submit a pre-proposal applications, and the requirements are basically the same whether you choose PHIUS or Living Building Challenge as a certification path. However, if you decide that you want to do PHIUS, at this point, that is with a pre-proposal submission, is when the PHIUS feasibility study has to be submitted. If the pre-proposal review is favorable and the project is invited to submit a full proposal, it'll be due towards the end of design development. And here, if this is a project that is pursuing Living Building Challenge certification, you really need to build in some time for their design development review. So except for two documents, so that's the PHIUS feasibility study and the Living Building Challenge design development review report, what has to be submitted for the applications is the same regardless of what certification option you choose. And then, of course, after the full proposal review, you'll be notified of the grant award outcome. So the additional resources that I mentioned include, we have the Accelerate Performance program here. It's run by Seventh Wave, which is part of Slipstream, and you can check their website for details. But essentially, they provide assistance to projects that are in the very early phases and are interested in incorporating performance-based procurement, including net zero energy performance into their project. ComEd's new construction program offers financial and technical assistance for buildings over 5,000 square feet. They offer a per kilowatt incentive based on the modeled energy savings. And here, the earlier you enroll, the higher the incentive that you're eligible for. It drops as project design advances. And again, check their website for details. Then we also have other potential rebates, incentives here from ComEd. And Ameren also has some incentives to support energy efficiency measures. Let's continue in the grant application process and assume that your particular project was awarded a grant. What next? So once the project is under construction, you can actually submit the first interim report and request the first payment, which we've set up to be up to 30% of the grant award. The next milestone is basically building completion and occupancy. So once the project is at the point where the building is occupied and the data monitoring is in place, you can then come in and request the second payment, file that second interim report, and request the second payout, which is up to another 30% of your grant award. And then the third and final milestone is finally, once your building is at least 80% occupied, you can start to track your 12 months of net zero energy performance. And when you can demonstrate those 12 months of net zero, you can then submit the project completion report and make the final payment request for the remaining 40% of the grant. And that's kind of, we haven't gotten any project that has reached that last 40% payout, but that's kind of where we hope the grant will be able to be closed out. And that's it for me, Lisa, for now at least.
Yep, thank you. So if you go on to the next slide here, I'm just going to briefly talk about one case study that recently got certified and went through this whole grant proposal process. And then I'm going to talk about what the PHIUS feasibility study is. what's required, what's the value, and all of that. As Gabriela mentioned, it is a requirement of their grant submission. It doesn't have to come from PHIUS, but of course we offer it as a service. So starting here, this is the Plainfield Park District project. This project is the first PHIUS Plus Source Zero Park District in the country. It was just certified, I think, last week. So you can see a lot of PV there. They're doing site net zero, essentially. They're offsetting all of their energy use on site using photovoltaics. Their source CUI was about 70 before PV and then 0 after PV, of course. So they did achieve the PHIUS Plus Source Zero. And that source CUI is about 30%, 30-ish% lower than the standard value for recreational facilities. So they did quite a bit of conservation measures, which is really what the PHIUS standard is putting into the net zero program. Go next, please. Okay, so this is just a snapshot image of the project. Just general R values showing here, and then the annual predicted performance. So you've got R60 roof, R40 walls. They had these panelized concrete walls with foam in between the concrete. They had perimeter slab insulation, not whole under slab insulation. They had pretty good windows, R6, very low window to wall ratios. You can kind of tell from this beautiful energy model screenshot in the right. Air tightness, they met the PHIUS limit, which is 0.05 CFM50 per foot squared. This was under PHIUS Plus 2015 as the base certification there, so met that. And then they have about a 215 kilowatt array, which should get about 275,000 kilowatt hours per year of production on site. So you can see the annual predictions below. Blue is electricity, green is gas. They do have gas for some heating and for hot water, which is one thing about PHIUS. You can offset your gas energy use with electricity at this time, which is one of the main or bigger differences between ILFI and PHIUS in terms of what can be offset there. Then you can see PV production, of course, more in the summer, less in the winter, but on an annual basis, this should offset the energy use. Next. Okay, so just jumping into what the feasibility study is, it's really just a quick preliminary model of your building, right at the start of the design or the inception of the design, and seeing where you'd have to go with different performance levels with your current design to meet the PHIUS Plus standard, whether it's Core 2018 or Source Zero. What happens is PHIUS takes the documentation, puts it in an energy model, and it kind of plays around with different values. So I'll get to that a little more detailed. The cost right now is a flat fee of $1,500. So we hope to keep this cost low. So it's a pretty low entry fee there. And then turnaround time is 5 to 10 business days. Next. Okay, so to start the study, we don't need much. We need a preliminary drawing set, floor plans, elevations ideally, or if you just have a window to wall ratio you're looking at. If you don't have elevations yet, even that amount is good enough to start this study. And it's a very simple energy model using defaults and using general assumptions to try to get that passing requirements early on. We asked for a 3D massing model to speed up the import of the geometry into the software if you have it. Site photos, or we just need the location to assess shading. Mechanical narrative, if that's something that is already kind of developed. If not, we can kind of play out a couple of different situations or prescribe what we think might be the best fit for the type of building that you're putting forth. And then this grant is mostly non-residential buildings, or I think all non-residential buildings almost. So then things such as occupancy use schedules for that park district, we need to know the opening hours, how many people, what's max occupancy, when are the workout classes, things like that. So you can schedule that type of equipment. It is important though that the more information we have about the project, the more accurate the energy model will be, of course. But you can get this very early on and just get very snapshot generic performance values. So if you go to the next. This shows what the feasibility study includes. So it includes a full Wolfe passive energy model. We do hand that over to you, and anyone can open that in the free version of the software, even if you don't have a paid version. Probably the main heart of what we include is what you see on the right side of the screen here. It's kind of a case comparison. I know it's very small, but I'll describe it here. So the top kind of points out the different envelope R values or envelope performance values, windows, walls, all of that we use in different cases. The middle for something like non-residential might point out different lighting power, different receptacle or plug load use. And then the bottom, different efficiencies for mechanical equipment. And then the very bottom, you see the different results. So you can see when things are passing, failing, what the differences between the cases were. You know, if I changed my, could you go back, sorry. If I change, you know, my window performance value, where did that get me in my source EUI, things like that. So the different impact of different changes. Generally, we do a base case, which would be on the far left here. Which is kind of what you submit to us. Sometimes you don't need another case. Sometimes what's submitted passes, or sometimes there's not really even a base case. You just kind of have a massing. So it's really case-by-case basis on what you get out of it. But it's target performance levels for both the envelope mechanical systems. You know, we talk through this whole case and report with the project team after. I don't think I included that here, but there's generally a 1 to 2 hour follow-up call for each of these projects to talk through the results, make sure everyone's on the same page about that. And then we also sometimes can do a comparison versus code if that's something you need for something in particular, or if you're just generally interested, need to sell this to a client. Okay, you can go on now. Okay, and then this is really the big kicker, like why should I want one? One of the biggest things is it really puts the important questions out there up front. So we see a lot when we do these studies, there's a lot of things we bring up and people are like, oh, well, I'm not really sure, we were gonna figure that out later. But when you're doing net zero, or at PHIUS at least, we think conservation first approach is really, really critical. And there are a lot of questions that kind of get breezed over early on that we think are really important. So putting this all out on the table up front at least puts this at the forefront of some of the, you know, designers' thinking. Even if it's not going to go all the way for certification, it at least like surfaces these questions and surfaces these potential savings measures. Yeah, and just highlights those. We also give you the energy model, so now you have a completed multi-passive energy model. If you wanted to make any adjustments to it, of course you could, and then you can see instantly what are the differences in my energy use from that. So then you can say, well, PHIUS wanted us to use this certain efficiency of ERV, but we're only going to get 50%. Where does that go with my site EUI? So you can just instantly make these changes and really see how the impact of your different decisions, which you might not have as much background information on without a model like this. It also lays the foundation for CPHC to pick up this work straight from the energy model and the reporting, and then join the project team. So this, it's important to note, PHIUS is not coming on as a CPHC. This is just kind of the first snapshot energy model to kickstart project teams off the ground there. And again, it's just a low-cost study, and we're hoping that it provides a lot of valuable information for project teams up front and when these decisions actually have to get made. Okay. So this is just kind of a few different unique feasibility studies, a lot of tall residential, a couple hotels, municipal center, the bottom right's that daycare, that Plainfield Park District daycare. So yeah, there's not one size fits all for PHIUS Plus certification. I'll just say that. Continue. Okay, and then the next couple slides are just a few resources in case you weren't aware of them. So we do have a multifamily resource site that has a bunch of case studies on it, webinars, a project team. So if you're trying to do this for the first time, this is an incredible resource for you for multifamily. And then next is the commercial site, same thing, case studies, webinars, design teams that have actually gone through that whole certification process. So this is just a really good resource for anyone jumping into one of these projects. And then next is just the guidebook, a little toot for the guidebook here. This would be your best friend if you're going through the certification process. So just be aware that that exists. I think that's all I had in this section, Gabriela. Yep.
Okay. I will show you a few slides here with projects that have come through our Net Zero Energy Building Grant Program. The Plainfield Park District that Lisa was talking about, they actually received a $1 million grant from us back in November of 2017. They started construction in December of that year, and the building was finished in early 2019, and it's I thought the first net zero recreation center in Illinois. I hadn't heard about the Lisa about the Source Net Zero in the country, so that's neat. But here the roof has 2 levels, and that's where the photovoltaic panels are housed that offset the building's energy consumption. It's a 39,800 square foot facility, has a basketball court, pickleball court, whatever, weight training, yoga studio, running track, and then it also has daycare. And this is one of the things that you see when you come into the entrance. The building features this really, I think, kind of neat net zero display with a monitor that will show the building's performance. And like Lisa said, they were PHIUS and PHIUS certified and Source Net Zero certified. Another project that we funded was the Granite City Housing Authority. They received about $260,000 in December of 2016. This particular building is a multi-family housing unit with 2 one-bedroom apartments. It received PHIUS plus 2015 certification. Here you can also see a photo of when they were doing the blower door testing to make sure that the building was tight enough. And this particular building, this is what it looks like now. It's kind of an affordable housing prototype that's being used as a demonstration project. So the hope is that if this building performs as expected, this may actually become the prototype for the Granite City Housing Authority's future multi-phase public housing development project. You can see at the kind of that top left edge of the roof there, they have a 6 kW solar array. And we do believe that this is the first net zero PHIUS certified affordable housing project in Illinois. Another project that we helped fund was Adlai Stevenson High School. They also received $1 million back in August of 2017 to support the addition of a new net zero energy wing. This is a 3-story, 50,000 square foot building that also includes some of their science labs. It's just about finished. It's going to open here in a couple of weeks when the students come back in August. And this building will rely on approximately 450 kW of PV to offset its annual energy consumption. Here we have the Village of Countryside. They completed a new municipal complex, which consists of the police station and a new city hall. It's a 2-story building with a basement, about 34,700 square feet total. And this particular building will rely on about 175, 180 kW of PV to help it be net zero. Somewhat smaller project here. This is St. Joseph School. In 2018, about a year ago, they received their Net Zero Energy Program grant, and they're currently finishing up construction on their Net Zero Energy Addition that is hopefully going to be ready by the start of school on August 25th. And in this slide, as well as the previous slide, you can see all the insulation and the attention to detail and the careful sealing that's required to make this a tight building. And we anticipate that this particular building will also receive its PHIUS certification. Another example here comes from the Park District of Oak Park. They decided to renovate and expand the Carroll Center, which is one of its community centers. This particular Carroll Center will be net zero and hopefully also source net zero, and should be completed by early 2020. And then the last one that I'm going to show you here is the Northbrook Park District is building net zero energy recreation center, kind of similar, same idea to the Plainfield Recreation Center. The project is about to start construction here any day, early August, we think, and should be completed in late 2020. And here is the slide for the CEU credit. The 5-digit code is 52116. We'll leave that up for a minute. And yeah, if you are interested in learning more about our Net Zero Energy Building Grant Program, or you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. And thank you for joining.
Thank you, Gabriela. So we do have quite a few questions that came in the question pane. So I'm going to go through some of these, starting near the front. We have plenty of time, so I'm just going to read some of these off, Gabriela. I think some of these might be addressed to you and some to me, so do my best here. The first question is, what are the best practices or takeaways from this presentation? Let's see. Here we're discussing positive net energy as a public mandate for all new construction. So I guess from my perspective, some of the best practices for net zero is conservation first. That's how some of these projects are. So most of these projects are able to get this on site, get site zero or site net zero. Without that, you're looking at offsite options and things like that. What are best practices, though, Gabriela, for you in terms of the processes and takeaways you've learned from, setting up this grant structure and trying to work with different certifications and things?
Yeah, so like I said, I mean, this is a work in progress and we are still learning and tweaking things. But one of the things that we try to do is we try to keep it fairly simple. Of course, for a foundation, usually the more money you give out, the more information you require of the applicants. But we really tried hard to align the application process with what was actually going on at different points, especially during the design phase of the project. So that's why we have these milestones, kind of like pre-design, schematic design, design development, and then once the building or the project is underway, start of construction, occupancy, and then final 12 months of performance. So we've tried to keep it simple, not request too much information as much as we felt like we needed in order to make a good decision. And then at the end, really do design a program that looks at the actual building performance, measured building performance, not just at what's modeled up front.
Great, thank you. We had a question come in about the final monitoring. So the question is that LBC has a 1-year verification period where PHIUS is based on modeling. Is the monitoring and performance verification based on an LBC model? That I cannot answer. Do you know, Gabriela, or is it any type of energy model for the LBC certification?
Yes, I mean, we don't specify exactly which model should be used. But in the end, what we're actually looking at after those 12 months is the actual building performance. So yes, the energy modeling is important, but what counts in the end is what the building actually does.
Right. And then kind of a piggyback on that, the question is what data is monitored? So you did say they need to break it out by load.
Yes.
Is there any specifics?
Let me just give a little bit of background. We work with a wide variety of applicants. Some are very small nonprofits, some are very large and very wealthy school districts. Some of them are designing, small 2-unit residential type buildings. Other ones are designing 50,000 square foot additions. So we want some granularity in terms of the data monitoring. So, the lighting, the heating, HVAC, the elevators, whatever is possible, but we work with the applicant, again, to kind of be reasonable. But yes, we do want load specific information to be tracked.
Great, thank you. And more on the monitoring, just before we jump away from that, there's a question: if your project doesn't generate enough on-site energy on its first 12 months to achieve net zero, can more PV be added later to hit a target over a 12-month period? Or hit the target? Hasn't happened, right?
Yes, I would say yes. I mean, of course, ideally, the calculations were correct up front. The modeling was done correctly, but I suppose, yes, if that's necessary, that could be done.
Mm-hmm. Okay, kind of jumping onto the solar. Someone wants to confirm their understanding that the RECs for the solar must be retired. Is that correct? That's correct for PHIUS, but I'm not sure if that's correct for the grant.
For us at the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation, any project that we fund, whether it's the building, our school programs, our wastewater programs, any solar that we fund, the RECs have to be retired.
Okay, and then the follow-up question is, are there solar incentives through the utilities that do not take ownership of the RECs? I'm not aware of any, but I don't know.
I mean, the only incentive that I'm aware of here for Illinois right now are the rebates available through Commonwealth Edison, and I believe that's $250 per kW of PV installed, and I don't think there's a REC requirement or having to turn over the RECs with that.
Thank you. There's just a comment here, so maybe I just need to clarify here. There was the slide showing the Plainfield Park District with the EUI of 0 after PV. I agree with this comment. It is a bit misleading. I should have put the net source energy is 0 after the PV, so I apologize for that. The EUI is still the same, and then it's being offset with PV to get to 0. Let's see. Okay, so would the CPHC take the same WFI file used for the feasibility study and add more detail? Ideally, yes, that's the thought. If the project stays, in the same design, it doesn't change too much. You take the same WFI file. What type of detail totally depends on the project. Totally depends on what stage the feasibility study was developed at. If it was later in the game, then maybe there's not a ton to change, but that's really up to the CPHC to work with the project team on to see what's trued up. So I think the second you get that model, you look at everything and make sure that that's up to date with where the project is. Also, I'm not sure if everyone saw this message. The course was pending AIA approval. It just received approval. So it's been approved now for AIA credits. Is Illinois Clean Energy a quasi-state entity? Is that where you get your funding?
No, we are a private organization. We were set up in 1999 with an endowment provided by our local utility company, which is Commonwealth Edison. So we function as a private foundation.
Okay. And then was this program developed in partnership or support of any government agency? So I think.
No, this was.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, entirely done here privately.
Yep, that's what it sounds like. I'm just reading these. I guess I can. Questions, a good question. As this is a national audience, are you aware of similar organizations in other states? Off the top of my head, I know there's, go ahead, you go first.
No, I was going to say other organizations such as other foundations that support.
Exactly, yeah.
I think the Clean Energy Trust in Oregon was trying to support net zero buildings. That's the, and was actually making funds available, but that's the only one that I'm aware of.
Okay, I think I agree with you on that one, Gabriela, and I'm not sure of any others off the top of my head. There are other people incentivizing different certifications, but in terms of funding for net zero, I cannot think of any others, but there might be. Can federal government projects be eligible for the Illinois Clean Energy Grant?
No, they cannot.
Okay. Are you planning to expand your program at all? I believe that's toward you.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure, I guess, what that question means. If maybe the question is, are we planning to continue this program? The answer is yes. So
Okay.
we have about 3 years now of experience. No, 3 years, just about, and plan on offering the program again next year. So.
Okay, great. Do applicants' projects typically get full grant funding? I guess that you kind of answered that in your slides. No one has gotten the full funding yet. That's correct?
Yeah, I mean, no one has made it all the way through to where they've collected the 100% of their grant award. And if the question is what portion of the project is paid for, I mean, we really look at the incremental costs that going net zero entails and fund a portion of those.
Okay. And I think you addressed this one too, Gabriela, but this question, will LEED Net Zero be added as an eligible certification in the future? You said maybe?
Yeah, we're looking into that at the moment, so we'll see.
Okay, we got a question. What's an example or two of how an early WFI model can influence the design? Before, really, if you can get a model done before assemblies are chosen and different window to wall ratios, you can test what kind of is the sweet spot in terms of a site UI. If you know you do want to work with the typical assembly or a certain window, you can do different iterations with that. We just had one recently that was having a lot of trouble meeting the PHIUS cooling target. It was pretty heavily glazed, and they're changing their shading design, kind of changing the massing of the building to shade windows more due to that effect. I think it just, more than influencing the design, it is asking the right questions up front and surfacing those questions that people need to think about.
Yeah, and if
but it also, yeah, please.
Lisa, I was just going to say, the feasibility study is very valuable, and I think not just to the design professionals, but to kind of the whole team that is involved in the net zero energy building project. Oftentimes there are many folks who are just not used to thinking about conservation that much, and certainly not putting it front and center as, you know, one of the primary focuses, and they really don't even know where to start. So doing this feasibility study early on, I think, is a great way to kind of orient the team and provide information on really what the different options are. So there are even people who have come in thinking about a grant, have never proceeded with the project, but have found the studies incredibly valuable upfront, just in terms of the kind of information it provides.
Great, thanks. I think you addressed this one too. Where does the foundation get the money?
Yeah, so we have a private endowment that we're slowly spending down. So for those of you who've got projects on the horizon, we will be around for maybe another 5 years or so.
Okay. And there was a question about skylights for this particular project. I don't know enough about it to answer that. Why weren't skylights used in that recreational center? Do you know, Gabriela? I do not believe there were.
I do not know why. I mean, again, we leave it up to our applicants to determine, you know, their design. So I don't know why they did not select skylights.
Mm-hmm. This particular person said, isn't it a state local energy code requirement for commercial single-story building? I'm guessing there was just some way around that mandate. Yeah, whether it's performance-based and they followed a different path or whatnot. And then maybe this is the last question. This is kind of loaded. How essential is certification if projects are being monitored? I'll start on that one. So certification and energy modeling, I guess, are two different things, which you know, but looking at the design up front and assessing conservation measures and doing all of that and, you know, making sure the model plays out as net zero is one thing, and that kind of at least focuses your design in the right way. But PHIUS certification also includes a lot of on-site quality assurance measures, the blower door testing, you know, testing the energy use of the equipment that's actually installed, making sure the lighting plans are the same as installed. And that's really, in my opinion, the key component that's going to get you the performance that you've predicted, and making sure that's actually what was planned, making sure the systems are working as you planned. That's what's going to get you that remaining 40% for the monitoring. So having a monitoring system is one thing, but you know, what if something goes wrong, or what if it's not passing? Then where do you go next? And I think that's where all the testing and on-site inspection is really helpful. Do you have a response for that, Gabriela? Uh-oh.
Hello?
You still there?
Oh, okay,
Yeah, we
I'm
can
back.
hear you now.
Okay, somehow the connection was gone. Did you want me to? I didn't hear anything that you said for the last question, so sorry about the certification and the monitoring. Did you want me to speak to that?
If you have an answer for it, sure. Like, how essential is certification if the projects are being monitored?
Well, for us, one of the, I think, main reasons for opting for certification was that for a program like PHIUS, there are, you know, certain performance requirements that the building has to meet in order to obtain certification. And we were really looking for buildings that stretched to high performance, rather than maybe a more average building that then would compensate with lots of on-site renewables. And we felt that, for example, a program like PHIUS would help.
Okay. There's one last question about this link on the PHIUS self-report page. I'll check on that after the webinar. I'm not sure. So just keep your 5-digit code handy. That link should be up soon. Okay, I don't see anything else new that's come in, so thank you, everyone. This webinar was recorded, and there will be a recording posted online in the next day or so. The 5-digit code, sorry, someone just asked me to restate that. It is 52116.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't go back to the previous slide.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.